Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Fallon, and I'm the president of the Berkshire Company. Along with my co-host, Lois Ritarossi of High Rock Strategies, we're excited to bring you this highly engaging conversation with a series of experts and how they are bringing their implants from the past to the present and on to the future. Lois, can you share with who we're going to be talking to and what they'll be sharing?
Yes, we have a talented group of panelists today that are going to share their ideas, strategies, and techniques. And that includes Tammy Golden, who's the Assistant Commissioner of Document Solutions in the state of Tennessee, Mike Lincoln, who's the State of Colorado Printer, Lauren Tarbet, who's the Supervisor of the Pflugerville Independent School District in Austin, Texas, and Danelle Clark, who's the Enterprise Correspondence Technology Manager at American Family Insurance. Our panelists' bios are in the handout section in your control panel if you'd like to find out a little bit more about them. And the panelists are going to share new strategies that they've implemented for managing their print and mail operations, new services that they and their teams are providing to remain relevant during all of the changes in business environments that we've all experienced in the last 20 plus months, and new staffing models to handle and respond to work from home rules in their various organizations. So a lot to talk about, Mark.
Lois, this sounds fantastic. What we're going to do is have each of the panelists separately, and then we're going to bring them all back for a group question and answer section. If you have any questions, please use on the right-hand side of your panel, either the questions or the chat function. We'll be monitoring both of those throughout and probably take most of those questions at the end. Lois, the webinar is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm really pleased to introduce our first panelist, and I've actually chatted with Tammy Golden from the state of Tennessee a few times in the last year about how they've responded and handled a myriad of changes that have come your way and weird other weather and things that have hit Nashville, right? Right, Tammy?
That's for sure.
So can you share a little bit by way of background, a little bit about your organization, your team, and a little bit about your equipment?
Absolutely. Lois, we've got a group that's been consolidated in the last few years where we consolidated our print group, our mail group, and our warehouse operation. So now we have offset and digital printing. We have inkjet that we use in our transactional print group. Mm-hmm. We manage all the incoming and outgoing mail for the state. We have graphic design, photography, scanning, and the warehouse and distribution operation.
Well, that is really full service, one-stop shopping for all the various state agencies and departments. So you shared with me that the state of Tennessee has consolidated a lot of their real estate as they've sort of continued the work from home rules, and many people in administrative roles are going to continue to work from home 1 to 4 days per week. So what has it meant for print operations and what your team has had to do to respond to your customers and getting printed materials to them?
Absolutely. We've certainly has made it challenging in a lot of ways. One of the ways is that a lot of the print that we did was event-based. We printed materials for conferences and trainings and those kinds of things, and that hasn't been happening as much in the last year and a half. So that print volume has declined. So that has come with its share of challenges. In addition, because our customers are to a large extent working from home, it makes it harder to do deliveries. And we had to change how we, especially with the mail delivery, how we make sure we can get agencies their mail or printed products, even though they may not be on site. So we have completely revamped our mail delivery operation through using smart lockers. We just now make one stop per building, which is certainly more efficient, but also makes more sense because where we used to go floor by floor, if there's not somebody on each floor, this way we can make sure we deliver to one location that is manned, and then they can pick up their mail from there more conveniently, whether it's a smart locker situation or a mail room in some of the buildings, if it's depending on how many tenants are in that building. We've also started doing mail scanning. So for those agencies that makes sense, we can scan it and deliver it electronically, and it doesn't matter where they are in that case.
That's great that you're facilitating people being able to, work from home and do their jobs and take on their responsibility. And while Mark and I are not in the business of stock tips, it seems lockers would be good companies to make your investments in. So Tammy, can you share a little bit about some of the new services that you're providing sort of in response to the pandemic, in addition to scanning, and other things that your team has taken on?
Sure. The mail scanning certainly is one. It's definitely challenging because there are certain things that you can't scan, right? We also deliver a lot of packages, so you can't scan that. There's been issues with check scanning and some of those things, so we can't do that in all cases. But we have also tried to sort of ramp up our digital technology in our graphic design area. So even though agencies may not need as much printed product in some cases for training classes or those kinds of things, if we can make the most of their digital experience through animation, augmented reality, those kinds of things, then that can make that more valuable and also provide us with additional revenue as well.
So what change have you implemented in 2021 that has allowed your team to be successful?
Well, I got to put the lockers at the top of that, because we had an issue where we had to get people their product and they weren't where they used to be. For a long time, they were having to pick up their mail in a centralized location, but obviously the lockers has allowed us to do that. We've also, we've always had a really robust cross-training program, but boy, I don't know how we would have made it through this if we didn't have such a robust cross-training program, because what's happened is we've had the lower volume in some areas, but then we still have these peak volumes that we have to manage. And so by consolidating these three groups and cross-training people across those groups, it allows us to move staff around as needed so that we can address those peaks and valleys a little bit more efficiently than we could have otherwise.
Tammy, I want you to share the story you shared with me when we last spoke about partnership, and how with the supply chain challenges that you've experienced, how one partner really stepped up to the plate, because I so value that as a real story and making a difference in our industry and in the business. And some people maybe have not read the blog that was on the IPMA website. So I'd love for you to share that.
We're happy to. We, like I'm sure everybody on this webinar has had issues with, paper envelopes taking longer to get, and all of our supplies. And at one point, we ran out of our Micker toner, which we need to print checks. And so we were trying to figure out what to do. We'd gone through all the normal resources. Our vendor was, it had been back ordered, call our friends in town, anybody else that we knew that might be able to help us, and didn't get very far. And then we thought, well, we're going to have to actually activate our DR plan just so that we can get checks printed, because we can't not print checks. And so as we called our disaster recovery vendor, they actually said, hey, we've got some Micker toner here. We'll just ship it to you, no problem, which they didn't have to do. They didn't make any money off of that. And if we would have activated the DR plan, they certainly stood to make quite a bit of money. So it was a nice surprise to find out we've got a partner like that at crunch time for something so critical, and helped my comfort level with, when we get to a point where we do have a disaster and have to activate that plan, I feel a lot more comfortable with that partnership.
Well, thank you. I just think it's such a compelling story for partnership and what it really means to be a true partner, right? In light of all the challenges we've all experienced. So thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and we'll see you in a few minutes toward later in the webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. I'd like to introduce Mike Lincoln, who is the state of Colorado printer, and I've had a couple of conversations with Mike in the last year. So Mike, can you share a little bit about your team and your organization? And I know you've been through some changes in the last year.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Lois. The Colorado's gone through some very similar changes that Tammy has just talked about. Her operation and my operation are very similar in a variety of ways. one of the things that we've had that transition to inkjet for a while now, and so our biggest customer is transactional based, and so we've got a lot of transactional business going through our shop. We'll do somewhere close to 22 to 25 million letters this year out of our operation, and that equates to just a bit over 120 million impressions. And that's just in the transactional space. You've got the other typical in-plant, quick print type work that we're doing, although very similar to Tammy. Our volumes have dried up a little bit with regards to that. There isn't a lot going on with regards to in-office meetings and conferences, et cetera. So we don't see a whole lot of demand right now for that. But the transactional space has been crazy. As Tammy mentioned, we're having the same kind of issues with inventory like the rest of the industry is. Staffing has been a challenge for us too. We had a little bit of attrition at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, and then as we went through it, there's a lot of folks that just didn't want to work, especially at a facility where you had to work on site for production jobs. We have about currently 52 full-time employees working for our organization. And as I mentioned, we've got inkjet and mail operations primarily for our print and mail side of the shop, but we also manage the States brand. And again, very similar to what Tammy talked about, we manage interdepartmental mail. We've got graphic design, and again, brand management, as I mentioned. We also do secure screening for incoming U.S. mail. I know Tammy's got that as well in her shop, but when the mail comes in, it goes through an X-ray process. And then we have what we refer to as a sniffer that takes air sampling around the mail just to make sure there isn't anything nefarious coming in through the mail or FedEx or UPS.
Well, that's I'm sure a critical service that all of the state agencies rely on for incoming mail. But Mike, I know you guys are in the interesting position that due to COVID, there were 2 other implants at the departmental level within the state of Colorado that closed, and you assumed that volume. So can you share a little bit of sort of workflow and staffing changes and what it meant to take on the additional volume from the Department of Revenue and the Department of Health as they closed down those smaller implants?
Absolutely. Department of Health was a very small implant operation to begin with. So, and when they decided to shutter their operation, they were really just there to provide those materials for in-person meetings. And so, as you can imagine, when COVID hit and everybody moved to the work from home model, they just didn't have the need. And they went for about 4 or 5 months with probably less than 3,000 impressions a month. With a staff of 3. So they very quickly realized that they didn't need to continue with that. And about halfway through the 2020, they really decided that they were going to stay with the work from home model for the majority of their staff. So at that point in time, they decided it would make most sense to shut their implant down. In doing so, they moved all of their printing to our operation. Again, it was a small amount of print, so it wasn't a lot to take on. And we were already providing larger print jobs to them anyway with our vendor resources that we have through our commercial print buying program that we do. Department of Revenue, however, was a completely different story. Department of Revenue had their own printing facility and mailing equipment. I wouldn't call them an implant because really the only thing they did for their department was tax printing and some of the Department of Motor Vehicle printing, which all of that transferred to us the end of May of this year, so May 21. What happened was they had gone through the same thing where they were deciding that the majority of their staff were going to stay work from home. Those who were going to come back into the office, they were going to locate them in a different building that the department occupied, which meant that they really didn't need to occupy the building where their print and mail center was. So they decided to close it down and migrate that work over to our facility, Integrated Document Solutions. There was a lot of work involved in doing so. We had to become FDI compliant. That was a big hurdle. Their mail increased our volume by probably 30%.
Wow.
On top of the fact that because of the type of work we do for the state in the transactional space, our volumes were already up 40%. So it was a pretty significant amount of work that we took on top of what we were doing with the pandemic itself.
Wow.
We did not actually need to take on any additional staff. So with the equipment that we had versus the way they were processing their own work, we were able to bring quite a variety of automated processes to what they did. And the work that they would usually take anywhere from 6 to 8 hours to process on a given day with 2 print operators and 4 mail operations folks, we can usually process within 3 to 4 hours every single day. We do that on our 3rd shift.
Mike, that's really impressive. So when we talked at the very beginning of the year, you had said you were, due to attrition and open positions, you were finally able to hire sort of at the very end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. So can you share, what changes did you make that's allowed your staff to be successful in light of the new and increased volume and having new people as well in several positions?
Well, there's been a variety of things that we've changed within the organization. On the production floor, we have really started to train our own. So we had a lot of difficulty finding individuals who were trained in our industry. There was a lot of folks that just weren't interested in coming to work, and that they may have been laid off at a mom and pop shop or even a larger commercial printer. But coming to work for the state just wasn't as attractive for some of those individuals. So what we did is we retooled the way we were hiring staff, and we have really focused on hiring for technical and mechanical aptitude and work ethic. And so if they hit those 3 things, then we will train the rest. And we've got a pretty significant amount of experience on our senior leadership staff and a lot of good training opportunity from that staff to impart to a younger group of individuals coming into our industry. And we've had some decent success. We're still seeing a little bit of attrition. Some people walk in the door and say, wow, this is really boring work. I don't want to do this. And then they leave. But then you've got others that just love to see how much they can produce in a day. And they really enjoy what they do. So it's been a diverse workforce that we've been exposed to, and COVID has certainly made a change in that landscape, but we've adapted pretty well.
That's really great. So, Tammy shared this great story about partnership. And, what's been your experience with hardware, software solutions, and all of the partners that are needed to make an operation like yours run? Can you share your experience with anything around partnership and how it's made a difference in light of, post-pandemic and continuing pandemic reality that we're all working in?
Absolutely. So, 2 of our major software partners have come to the table to really help us migrate through the changes. It's been challenging at times, and we've had to find new opportunities. Plugs for 2 of those vendors, Solimar Systems and RSA, are probably 2 of them that have really stepped to the plate and really helped us manage some of the challenges that we've had on the software side of the industry and the challenges that we've had, and they've been tremendous. Also on the supply chain side, we also had very similar experiences to Tammy, where we've had suppliers who would very freely help out in a pinch where they really wouldn't have to do that. So not only have we seen that on the equipment side, but we've also seen that on some of the supply chain side. So papers and envelopes and a lot of creativity, I think, from the last 22 plus months, where what we once thought as business as normal or business as usual is no longer the case. Everybody's got to be a little bit creative in their problem solving approaches, and I've had very good experiences with majority of our vendors on that front.
That's great, Mike. I appreciate you sharing, and it gives me a little bit of inspiration when I talk to people like you and hear those kind of stories. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and we'll look forward to chatting a little more a little later in the webinar. Thank you. It's my pleasure to now introduce Lauren Tarbet from Pflugerville Independent School District in Austin. And for those of you who don't know, they're fairly large school districts in Austin. So Lauren, I know we met at Printing United back when we went to live conferences. My gosh, it seems so long ago. Can you tell us a little bit about the size and scope of your school district in terms of numbers of schools, teachers, and students to give everyone a little context about what your print operation is supporting?
Sure. So our district has approximately 26,000 students. It was estimated to be higher, but obviously the pandemic, that's kind of affecting enrollment numbers. We're hoping that that goes back up. And then staff, there's about 3,600. And then we have, let's see, we keep adding campuses. We're like constantly growing. So we've got 4 high schools. We've got 7 middle schools now. We just got a new one. Well, they started this year, but they haven't opened the campus. You know, everything's kind of fallen behind, but they're about to open that. And then we've got 22 elementaries.
Wow.
Yep, and they're already working on the 23rd one. Yeah, and here in the copy center, I've got 8 full-time employees, including myself. Kind of all different positions. We've got an on-site designer as well, which works out real well just because a lot of the campuses, I mean, they don't really have time to do some of this, you know, designing things like that themselves. So we handle some of that for them. Let's see, equipment. We've got 8 high volume black and white production machines. We've got 2 color machines. We also have a 60-inch wide format latex printer that we acquired actually right before the pandemic hit, which was a great thing just because, you know, the need for floor decals, banners, COVID related material, it worked out really good that we had that because we were able to save the district a little bit, you know, they're not having to outsource nearly as much as they would have.
Yeah, that seemed like a very, very smart investment at the time. So I know that Texas returned to in-person learning in August of 2020 as soon as they possibly could, including your school district. So what changes occurred in terms of your print ordering and supporting teachers and students at the beginning of the pandemic that you really saw that you were going to need to do some things differently, if anything?
Mm-hmm. So right when the pandemic hit, we were actually on spring break. So we didn't come back from spring break for 2 weeks, but then we actually came back just because the need was there for, so at the beginning of April, they needed to get physical distance learning packets out to, you know, so many people. They didn't, you know, account for every single person on campus because a lot of people do have Wi-Fi, so they didn't need the physical copies. But I mean, we were running, you know, physical copies, you know, 8 weeks until the end of school, just consistently all day, every day. We were fortunate enough that we were able to social distance ourselves a little bit here in the copy center. So we, you know, we only had a few staff on hand at any given time, but that kept us busy. And then we did a lot of our normal stuff during the summer that we normally do. And come August, when we actually it was September is when we actually came back on campus. We noticed a dramatic decrease in the amount of jobs that we were actually doing. Previous years, we'd do between 3 and 5 million impressions a month in the copy center. And, you know, then we were maybe doing, you know, 100, 200 jobs a day, you know, so just down to, you know, a couple 100,000 every month. So it was a big change. So we had to, you know, figure out additional offerings, things to keep us busy in the copy center.
So what new services have you guys taken on this year? What new things are you doing to support your teachers and your students?
So we, in addition to the wide format printer, we were doing all these floor decals and we were having to hand cut everything. So we're cutting all these.
So much fun, isn't it? The person who wants to do the hand cutting.
Yeah, it was not fun. And then, you know, I mean, and it's not perfect, you know, and you want your stuff to go out as nice as you can. So we recently purchased it is a, I guess a cutter plotter basically, and it cuts vinyl. So we haven't, we're really close to getting it online. We've been trained on it, but we're hoping that we can use it not only for the things like the floor decals, but you've got, bumper stickers. There's so many applications that you can use that people are outsourcing all these items. So we're hoping we can bring that in. We've also been doing a lot more design work for campuses.
So what's your biggest takeaway in terms of changes that you guys have implemented for your team to be successful this year?
I would say, just setting new processes in place to make us more efficient, I think is one of the biggest things we've done. We, planning for, the whole supply thing that's going on right now. There's all these papers that, the teachers love and stuff. I just can't get it in. So I'm having to cut some things, and we'll probably make it, permanent cuts. But, I hope to bring in other new things that, can excite people. They get so excited about all these color options and, pretty things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how these new processes, carry us through in the 22. We're hoping that we're going to get those numbers back up and continue growing.
Great. Well, there's definitely going to be more students. You can count on that, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for your insight. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and we'll welcome you back in a few minutes. It's my pleasure to introduce Danelle Clark, who's with American Family Insurance, a very large insurance company that supports customers, over 12 million customers across the country. And Danelle has actually been there for many years, and she is responsible for enterprise correspondence, and she's the technologies manager in the print operation at American Family. Danelle, can you join us with your camera? There she is, with a beautiful fireplace. Can you unmute? Let's see if we can unmute you.
It does help, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. We want to hear you, my friend.
Yeah. So this is the best part of working remote. It's the cozy environment.
Not to be cozy and at home. Good for you. So Danelle, tell us a little bit about the print mail operation and then the correspondence team that you manage, so people have some context around what your in-plant looks like, because I know it's very different than what Tammy, Mike, and Lauren have just shared.
Yeah, our facility is, we have our production area is, we have a commercial facility that's across the street from our main headquarters. In the main headquarters and the commercial print, the staff is 55 people that work 24/5. And we have a multitude of commercial devices, digital press, a press, finishing equipment, wide format, pretty much anything you need to do with commercial. And in the transactional space, we have 2 high-speed continuous printers and 3 cut sheet printers and 4 inserters across 2 facilities. We have a disaster recovery at another location within the same city. We produce about 50 million pieces a year currently. We've acquired 5 companies, well, 4 companies over the past couple of years. And so the effort has been to onboard everybody into what we call an enterprise platform. So we are working on moving everybody to the same print facility, to the same platform of producing the work using we were using OpenText, and now we're using SmartCom. So all of our operating companies will be converted over into that SmartCom solution, and it comes down a new pipeline that we have created to then optimize work so that it runs more efficiently. Today we have probably about 450 daily jobs, and it's just like you could have a small job, a long run, but it's stopping at that inserter every time that you're done with a job. So part of this initiative is to do the rolls by the type of envelope, so you can be more efficient and we can run without stopping and get that work out the door that much faster.
So I know you've spent a great deal of your career in and around workflow and operational efficiencies. And with those kind of acquisitions, having worked with clients who've made lots of acquisitions, there's always that huge transition plan. So can you share a little bit about what changes you guys have implemented in addition as a result of the pandemic, or any changes that are now permanent in the print mail operation?
Sure. Well, the entire company as an enterprise, we're about 5% that are now on site and 95% are work from home. So that is a huge shift in anything we've ever had before. Most of our staff that's on site is those essential workers who are getting the work out for us. We've implemented obviously safety protocols, sanitary, everything is social distance, and we do require vaccination to even enter the building. So there's a lot of safety measures that have been put in place.
Excellent. And from a staffing perspective, with essential workers on site and most everybody else working from home, have there been any staffing changes that you guys have implemented as that that you're going to keep in addition for into the future?
When we started with this pandemic, we had the previous 7 years of implementing and renewing our space. So, we went from 12 inserters to 4, and from 9 printers to 5. So we've really, and then we implemented new software. We've already been working on this workflow. We converted from forms to wet paper factory in 2019. So I think we're really lucky in the way that we just happen to be, refreshing our equipment and our technology, and it really positioned us to not miss a beat during this pandemic. We have so many automated workflows, not having forms anymore. We haven't really run into paper issues. We're lucky for that. I mean, soon it might be an issue, but we haven't had that problem yet. So the whole automated process, I think, has set us up to be successful. We made it through this pandemic. We added 4 million pieces within that pandemic year just for, a return of premium that we call it, credits to customers. We didn't miss a beat. We've not missed an SLA yet since the pandemic. So we've really become efficient at this automated workflow and even communication over with the people on site and the people who are remote.
That's a great success story. That yes, some of the bits and pieces that you put in place in terms of white paper factory and automation really did serve you well through creating an ability to get higher volumes of mail out with the same or less staff. My other question is, and you heard Tammy and you hear Mike share about partners. And so as you are in the midst of a software implementation, can you share any success stories or strategies you've had with partnerships that have made a difference in the operation being able to do what you guys do best?
Well, our area actually leads, the software, and we take in all the work that's already through an automated process. So the only other partner relationships that we're working on are those operating companies that we're working on onboarding into our facility. So today we produce 50 million pieces through American Family. By the end of 2023, when all of our companies are onboarded, we will be producing about 90 million pieces a year. And currently, the platform that we have, we see that we're going to be okay with capacity, and we have been fine with staffing. I will say now we don't have a lot of attrition. We have people who have been there for 40 years in these operations. However, they're all now in a big group becoming retirement ready, and so some are starting to put in that notice. So there will be a change in 2022 that we're going to have to look at staffing and beefing up these areas with all the retirements going on.
Got it. So I think you should probably reach out to Tammy, because they actually seemed to face that about a year ago in response to just a number of people at retirement age. And it's very true in the industry in general that there are a lot of senior people and baby boomers near retirement that just happen to be in the printing and mailing industry. So that's a great topic that we probably should pursue. So can you share what's the biggest change that you've made that's allowed your team to be successful this year?
The biggest change for my team is, well, actually on my team, I worked on my team and I just became the manager of the team just this past year. So I had to transition from, thank you, I had to transition from a peer to a manager. That's been a huge transition. I've worked with my group for 18 years for most of them, so we have had a very close relationship. So we've had to do a little bit of adjustment in just work coverage and areas that we support. We support quite a wide variety. We support like enterprise scanning. We do all of the local devices that you print from, and we do like the big transactional and the commercial. So it's a big group of things to manage, and we only have 7 people. So I think that we have an amazing talent, and we have been successful with things we have set up. And the transition from the management or the work to the management, a little tricky at first, just because I was the only one that knew the software that we just implemented. So if I were hit by a bus prior to this happening, we would have been really in trouble. So it's been good to get other people up to speed and trained on what I only knew. So moving forward, that support is going to be that much better.
Yep. Cross training. It's great.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'd like to ask all of the panelists to come back on with your cameras, and I'm guessing there's a few questions in the Q&A in the chat that Mark maybe share with us, so that we can get a little more input from our attendees who are out there who would like to hear more about what's going on in school districts and insurance companies and states around print and mail, and how to be more successful doing it. So I guess one question, let's start with Tammy. We'll go back to the beginning. From a planning perspective, it's that time of year. Here it is. It's December. The holidays 2022 is upon us. What have you planned, or what are you going to do to make 2022 successful for your operation and your team?
Thanks. I think one of the issues goes around the staffing. I think everybody on the panel mentioned staffing challenges, and so we're trying to be pretty creative and do some things that we have not done as much in the past. We are looking at potentially working with high schools or vocational schools to start like a training program. We have hired before from our Department of Human Services within the state has it's called the Tennessee Rehabilitation Center. And we have hired people through their program before that came as like job shadowing, and we ended up able to hire them, and it was very successful. So we've talked about expanding that program, working with the prisons, other things like that, just to try to make sure we're able to manage through the staffing challenges that we have today.
Great, thank you. Mike, can you share what have you planned, or what new things are you implementing to make 2022 successful for your team?
Other than the fact that I want to say ditto to just about everything Tammy has said. So we've got some really big projects on the table for this coming year. We've got a new inkjet coming on board in installation will start in January. We're also implementing a new MIS. So 2 really big changes and 2 very large projects for our operation. In addition to that, continuing to work through the staffing challenges. We are also working with our Division of Vocational Rehab in Colorado, trying to find some additional resources for staffing on our side. And continuing to get very creative about finding inventory, because that has been one of our biggest challenges, and finding ways to ask for permission to go outside of normal procurement processes, because when you find something, you've got to be able to buy it rather than put it on the bid system and wait for 3 weeks to have nobody respond.
Yeah, I bet creativity is going to be the biggest need in the procurement area, right? So
Absolutely.
Lauren, in terms of your plan for 2022, as you guys we'll take the Christmas holiday break and then come back for, spring semester. What are some of the things you guys are looking to do to plan for success in 2022?
Yeah, so I think it's just going to be all about, the new services, what can the coffee center do, for the district that we haven't done before, it gets people excited when we offer new things. So I'm really going to start pushing some of the things once we're all ready and set. But we've been fortunate, everyone else was saying staffing issues. We've been fortunate that I've been able to keep all my staff here, and I'm actually looking at possibly either adding some staff or, maybe altering schedules to accommodate, new campuses and increase volume. And like I said, we've got a great district behind us, and they're, really, open to whatever I have to suggest for it. So I think it'll be a good year. Like I said, our numbers are going back up. We're staying busy, and we'll have to see what the new year brings.
That's great. So Danelle, we do have one question, and I'm curious and see if it applies to you and to anyone else, if you can go first. And the question from one of the attendees is, did you incent any of your employees to stay on through the pandemic? Did you have a need to give incentives, and what type of incentives did you give?
We did. We offered additional pay. We offered thank you days when we, shifted staff to give appreciation to all that they did. We provided meals for them. Actually, American Family, we're kind of testing out some of that little bit of a hybrid, and we're offering like free breakfast and lunch to anybody who is in the office. So I think they do a really good job in incenting and making sure that people are recognized for the work that they're doing.
Great, thank you. Tammy, have you guys, did you implement incentives of hard dollar kind or any other kind to keep your staff happy, healthy, and in place?
I wish. The government's a little bit harder to do that, but there were some things that were done. Of course, we tried really hard to help keep morale up, but at the very beginning, the March, April, May, and June of 2020, they basically only wanted us to produce the work that was essential to the health and safety of citizens. So we were only doing that work, but they were for those people who couldn't work from home at all. There's nothing that they could do at home. They were still getting paid for a full day, even if they weren't working a full day. So they would only do that critical work and then go home, or if there wasn't any critical work, they wouldn't come in at all, and we're still getting paid. So that was definitely a motivator and an incentive for people. That stopped July 1. Of course, state government's not going to continue like that for a long period of time. And then after that, it was tough because people were here and sometimes didn't have work, and they're like, why do I have to be here when I don't have work? But the alternative was they had to take their annual or sick leave. So we just tried to do things, to encourage people and let them know that they were appreciated. The commissioner would come down and greet people, or we'd, bring breakfast or whatever we could do to just try to keep morale up through that time.
That's great. Mike, how about, what's your thought, and what did you guys do from an incentive perspective?
We're very similar again to Tammy, although we were able to find a way to financially incentivize some of our staff. Our governor had, actually 2 governors ago, instituted something called Spot Awards. And so it's essentially like a bonus program. But as you can imagine, being government, those bonuses are rather small in comparison to what you might see in the commercial world or in the private sector. However, that was a big help. We also were very, very understanding about life needs. So if we had somebody who needed to make a change in their shift, we would accommodate as best we could. And we actually really moved towards that very team-oriented conversation. So if somebody needed to do something, engage their teammates and ask them if somebody can fill in for them. It worked in many cases, and similar to Tammy as well, we brought in a lot of meals, lunches. We're a 24/7 operation 2 weeks out of every month, and 24/6 the other weeks. And so it can be a grind, as you can imagine, and just working hard to make sure that the staff are engaged and understand how appreciated they are. And really working in government is it's to its own with regards to the type of individual. They've got to feel like they're making a difference. And so in this pandemic, I think a lot of our staff really did feel that they were providing a critical service to the taxpayers and the constituents of Colorado.
That's wonderful. Mark, are there questions in the chat from other attendees? Mark, you're muted. You are still muted, my friend. How come?
Says that I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted. There you go. We can hear you now.
Okay, so this kind of goes into what Mike was saying that each of you have talked about a little bit, and it's around pay because as an in-plant, you don't really have as much control as a service provider might, but you're still competing with a lot of entry-level jobs where well before any legislation about minimum salaries, that grocery stores are now paying more. Walmart is paying more. My local grocer had a commercial. They're starting at $22 an hour. So are you seeing that impact your staff, or is it because, whether Mike, as you said, because working for the state is giving more? Lauren, I would imagine that's similar, right, as being part of the school system. Or, are you seeing that challenge with that impact, or has that not been a player yet?
I don't mind taking that. It absolutely is having an impact. I notice it when we're trying to hire, there's less people on the register. We call it the register. Then there used to be less people applying for the jobs. We have great benefits with the state, but at the end of the day, benefits don't pay the light bill. And so what can we do to make it worthwhile? And to Mike's point, there is a feeling of making a difference. That's important for people. But again, we have to be able to compete financially. We've tried to do some creative things like others have said. We've let people do 4-day work weeks for the first time. We had never done that before. Typically, the state requires you to take an hour lunch, but we got special permission for our production staff to be able to do 30 minutes if they wanted, so they could leave 30 minutes earlier. Just anything we can think of to try to, work with people and help make it as competitive as possible with the other industries across the city.
Great. Anyone else have anything to add? Or,
we increased our minimum wage it was $8.15 and we did raise it to $20. So anybody who was below that did get bumped up, and that actually went in pre-pandemic right before it. So good timing on that one.
Well, and that's one thing that's interesting. Both you and Mike and Lauren, right? You had all implemented some technology changes right before the pandemic that allowed you, right, whether it was wide format or inkjet or software. And I think that's just great. But I kind of wanted to continue that because most of a lot of what you print has to go into the mail. And we all saw the first double postage rate increase this year. Next year, there's only going to be one, but it's predicted that's probably going to be between 5 and 7%, based on current inflation and what the Postmaster General has said. So have you made any changes there, or have you made changes because of the service standard being lowered as well?
Mike, you want to give it a go?
You're muted.
Muted.
There you go. You're unmuted.
There you go. Thank you. It's definitely a challenge. So you think about it from through a variety of lenses. One of them is the communication with a certain part of the population that mail is still their primary source to get that information. There's a lot of drive, and we hear it throughout our industry about moving to digital communication and reducing how much transactional print is done and trying to reduce that mail volume as well. And of course, the big driver is now not only is it postage increases, but these increases in envelopes and paper. It's just very difficult on a fixed budget, and I'm sure the school district is very much the same way. It's you've got to fight for those dollar resources in order to do this. So what we're doing is really looking at the technologies. Tammy mentioned it earlier, the augmented reality, and really trying to find the balance between more targeted communications and trying to bring additional value to what we print. I know we're going to be printing for decades to come, even though a lot of people say we're a dying breed, but I think we're going to be printing And I think the biggest challenge is how do you leverage all of the technologies that are available in our toolbox and increase the value of what we do and how we deliver communications to our customers. So augmented reality being one, being able to provide more transparent information to our customers with regards to how their mail performance is going. So back to the delivery standard question, that does create all sorts of challenges when the feds want you to deliver a piece of mail within 24 to 40 hours, but the Postal Service says, well, we're going to change that to 3 to 4 days. And, they're both federal entities telling us they're going to do things that are slightly contradictory. So the challenges are there. What I have found that we as an industry have to be better at consulting with our customers and helping them understand the variety of impacts that we're facing now, partially due to COVID and partially now due to the economy as a result of COVID.
Great. Anybody want to add to that? Lauren, Tammy?
I agree with Mike. It's a challenge where, the main thing we're trying to do is communicate to our customers and make sure that they understand. We worked so hard in the last few years to reduce the turnaround time, and where we've gotten everything in transactional side that prints overnight and mails the next day. But now it takes us longer to get the supplies to do it, and it takes it longer to get delivered after it leaves us. So just making sure that they're aware of that and can plan accordingly so that people get the information in time.
So
Lauren,
Danelle,
Lauren, your mic had turned green there. Did you want to add?
All right. Yeah, so we're fortunate that we're all inter-district delivery. We've got a great warehouse staff that takes all of our stuff for us, but I have noticed, things that used to be mailed out, things like report cards, stuff like that, they've changed it to, I'm assuming, just a cost saving mechanism. We're sending it out in emails to, more. They've upgraded some technology, where parents can log on and view these documents as opposed to having us print it and send it out for them. But we're still doing okay with it. We've just cut down a little bit on our quantities.
Okay.
So Danelle, you uniquely have to mail to all 50 states from your print mail facility, whereas everyone else is kind of dealing with a much smaller geography. So how has the change in the United States Postal Service standard, what have you guys seen as the impact, or what are you guys doing differently in response to that?
We have critical communications, obviously, like you have cancellations, you have payments and checks and all of that. We've gone, unfortunately, a more expensive route for some of them with the delay, like checks. We're doing a lot more overnight checks, which is extremely costly. So we're trying to find a way to get customers to accept that more with the automatic deposit instead of getting the check physically. Averages about $50 in overnight check. So sometimes we're mailing a check that's less than the postage we pay to send it out. So we're trying to change the behavior there on just accepting that in an electronic deposit. That's probably our biggest one.
Changing consumer behavior, never an easy thing, but many of us have adapted to lots of new things in the last 20 months, haven't we? Well, I would just like to thank all of you for taking your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise and ideas and things that are making your implants successful. I know we have a whole lot of people out there that are attending and several others that will be getting the replay. So I would like to thank you. Mark.
And so Danelle, Lauren, Mike, and Tammy, for those of you who know me, I started in this business as an implant way back in the 1980s. And there was a man at that time on Wang, he had a company, Wang Computer, who said, we will have the paperless office within a decade. Well, his company is bankrupt and we are still around. So paper is still just so important. I loved continuously hearing this service, teamwork, right? I mean, that is what this is all about. Your employees, were the essential workers and are the essential workers long before the pandemic, were behind the scenes making this happen every day. And you're the leaders who make this happen. So On behalf of Lois, Wendy, and I, we want to thank you. We want to thank all of our attendees for participating today. We will have a replay of this up sometime either tonight or tomorrow. But thank you all again. We appreciate it, and we hope everybody has a very happy holiday season. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.